A hushed boarding gate, the air thick with the scent of anticipation and stale coffee. Then a sharp, disdainful laugh pierces the calm. A young black girl, her eyes wide with innocent excitement for her first flight, stands frozen, her small hand clutching her mother's. The flight attendant, a woman named Bethany, with a perfectly coiffed blonde bob and a sneer, openly mocks her. Some people, Bethany drawls loud enough for others to hear, just don't know their place. Little did she know that place was about to become the very top of the airline's corporate ladder, and the girl's mother, a woman named Ms. Eleanor Vance, held the power to ground Bethany's career permanently. This isn't just a story about a rude encounter. It's about the seismic shift of power, the quiet dignity of a mother's love, and the explosive karma that awaits those who judge too quickly. Get ready for a tale of justified comeuppance that will leave you cheering. The fluorescent lights of Gate B-23 at O'Hare International hummed with the usual pre-flight energy. Families chattered, business travelers tapped away on laptops, and the distinct aroma of airport cinnamon rolls mingled with a faint disinfectant smell. Among the throng stood 11-year-old Chloe Vance, her braided hair adorned with colorful beads, her face alight with an almost incandescent joy. This wasn't just any flight. It was her first solo trip to visit her grandmother in Orlando, a milestone she'd been eagerly counting down to for months. Beside her, her mother, Eleanor Vance, exuded a quiet strength, her designer suit speaking volumes about her professional standing, yet her gaze was entirely focused on her daughter. Eleanor's expression was a mixture of pride, affection, and a faint, almost imperceptible weariness that only a CEO could truly understand. "Remember everything I told you, sweetie?" Eleanor knelt, adjusting the strap of Chloe's small, glittery backpack. "Your passport is in the front pocket. The emergency contact card is in your wallet, and if you need anything at all, you ask the flight attendant." Chloe nodded vigorously, her excitement barely contained. "I know, Mom. And no fizzy drinks because they make my tummy hurt, and don't forget my special blanket." Eleanor chuckled, a warm, melodic sound. "That's my girl. Now promise me you'll call as soon as you land." "I promise." Chloe threw her arms around her mother's neck, a quick, fierce hug. As they approached the boarding line for Zone 1, a flight attendant with sharp, angular features and a meticulously styled blonde bob, named Bethany Rourke, stood at the podium. Bethany, a veteran of 15 years with global wings, prided herself on her efficiency, her ability to spot problem passengers from a mile away, and her unwavering adherence to protocol, at least her interpretation of it. Her smile, when she bothered to offer one, rarely reached her eyes, and today it was entirely absent. Bethany's gaze swept over the Vances. Her eyes lingered on Chloe's braids, then on Eleanor's understated, yet clearly expensive briefcase. There was an almost imperceptible tightening around Bethany's mouth, a subtle shift in her posture that Eleanor, accustomed to navigating subtle social cues in high-stakes boardrooms, immediately registered. It was a look she knew well, a blend of judgment and dismissiveness. "Next," Bethany called out, her voice crisp, bordering on clipped. Eleanor guided Chloe forward. "Good morning," she said, offering a polite smile. "This is Chloe Vance. She's an unaccompanied minor traveling to Orlando." Eleanor presented Chloe's boarding pass and passport. Bethany took the documents, her perfectly manicured fingers barely brushing Eleanor's. As she scanned the boarding pass, her eyes narrowed. She glanced at Chloe, who was now bouncing slightly on the balls of her feet, her eyes wide with innocent wonder at the plane visible through the large window. "Unaccompanied minor, huh?" Bethany's tone was laced with an almost imperceptible hint of sarcasm. She held up the boarding pass, not quite looking at Eleanor. "And what exactly do you think you're doing, young lady?" she directed at Chloe, her voice suddenly much louder, echoing slightly in the relatively quiet boarding area. Chloe flinched, her excited bounce replaced by an instant stillness. Her smile faltered. Eleanor felt a prickle of unease. "I'm going to Orlando," Chloe whispered, her voice barely audible. Bethany let out a short, sharp laugh, loud enough to draw the attention of a few other passengers. "Oh, you are you? Well, you better be on your best behavior. We don't tolerate any nonsense on my flights. You hear me?" Eleanor stepped forward, her polite smile replaced by a calm, firm expression. I assure you, my daughter is extremely well behaved. There will be no nonsense. Bethany finally looked at Eleanor, a condescending smirk playing on her lips. I wasn't talking to you, ma'am. I was talking to the child. Some parents, she paused, her gaze sweeping over Eleanor's expensive attire with a hint of disdain, just don't teach their children manners anymore. They think they can just buy their way onto a plane and expect special treatment. A heavy silence descended. Several passengers nearby exchanged uncomfortable glances. Chloe's lower lip began to tremble. Eleanor felt a cold knot form in her stomach. This wasn't just rudeness. It was a deliberate, targeted act of humiliation, thinly veiled with an undercurrent of racial bias that Eleanor had faced countless times in her life, but never directed so overtly at her child. I beg your pardon? Eleanor's voice was dangerously low, a stark contrast to Bethany's loud pronouncements. Are you implying something about my daughter or about me? Bethany, however, seemed emboldened by Eleanor's calm demeanor, mistaking it for weakness. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a stage whisper that was still clearly audible. I'm just saying some people, she gestured vaguely at Chloe, then at Eleanor, don't understand how things work. This isn't a playground, and frankly, with those beads, she gestured dismissively at Chloe's hair. She looks like she's going to a party, not flying on a reputable airline. Chloe's eyes welled up, her small hands clutching the strap of her backpack so tightly her knuckles turned white. The joy had completely drained from her face, replaced by mortification and confusion. Eleanor took a deep breath, her mind racing. Every instinct screamed at her to unleash a torrent of justified anger. But decades of navigating corporate jungles had taught her the power of composure, the strategic advantage of controlled response. She knew this was not the time or place for an emotional outburst. Not yet. My daughter's appearance is perfectly appropriate, Eleanor stated, her voice regaining its earlier, softer tone, yet with an undeniable steel underneath. And her behavior will be exemplary, as it always is. Now, if you could please process her boarding pass so she doesn't miss her flight. Bethany, sensing she might have pushed too far, finally snatched the boarding pass back, her face a mask of annoyance. She scanned it quickly, a grunt of irritation escaping her lips. Fine. Zone 1. You can board. She shoved the pass back towards Eleanor, avoiding eye contact. Next, she barked, turning her attention to the next passenger in line, as if Eleanor and Chloe were already forgotten nuisances. Eleanor took the boarding pass, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the immense effort of suppressing a volcanic rage. She knelt down again, pulling Chloe into a tight hug. It's okay, baby, she whispered, kissing her daughter's tear-streaked cheek. Don't listen to her. She's just a mean person, and mean people are usually very unhappy. Chloe sniffled, burying her face in her mother's shoulder. But she said I don't know my place, Mom, and she said my beads were ugly. Eleanor held her daughter at arm's length, looking directly into her eyes. Listen to me, Chloe Vance. Your place is wherever you choose to make it, and that's usually at the very top. And your beads are beautiful. Don't ever let anyone, especially someone who is clearly miserable with their own life, tell you otherwise. Do you understand? Chloe nodded slowly, her tears subsiding, replaced by a flicker of the usual determination Eleanor so admired in her. Good. Now go show them how a truly amazing person flies, okay? I love you. I love you too, Mom, Chloe whispered, her voice still shaky, but a faint smile returning. She turned, gave one last hesitant look at Bethany, who was now loudly instructing another passenger, and then, with a renewed sense of purpose, walked towards the jet bridge. Eleanor watched until her daughter disappeared into the tunnel, a silent promise forming in her mind. Bethany Rourke had just made a very powerful enemy, and she had no idea the storm she had just unleashed. Eleanor Vance watched the last straggling passengers disappear into the jet bridge, her mind a whirlwind of controlled fury. Chloe's tear-streaked face was seared into her memory. The blatant disrespect, the thinly veiled racial slurs, the casual cruelty directed at an innocent child. It was beyond infuriating. It was a personal affront that struck at the core of Eleanor's being, not just as a mother, but as a woman who had spent her entire career dismantling barriers and proving her worth in environments that often sought to diminish her. Eleanor wasn't just Ma'am or Chloe's mother. She was Eleanor Vance, the newly appointed CEO of Global Wings, the very airline Bethany Rourke worked for. Her appointment had been announced just 3 weeks prior, and while the internal memo had gone out to all employees, including flight attendants, it was clear Bethany had either not read it or simply hadn't connected the name to the unassuming woman in front of her. The official public announcement was slated for later that week, following a final board meeting. Eleanor had intentionally kept a low profile during her transition, wanting to observe the company's operations from the ground up, to truly understand its culture before implementing her vision. Today, she had seen a part of that culture she would not tolerate. As the gate agent announced the final call for Flight 714 to Orlando, Eleanor stepped aside, pulling out her phone. Her fingers, usually so precise and quick, trembled slightly as she scrolled through her contacts. She found the name she was looking for: David Chen, head of HR. She walked away from the gate area, finding a quieter corner near a deserted gift shop. "David," she began, her voice calm but with an unmistakable edge that David, her longtime colleague and confidant, immediately recognized. "It's Eleanor. I need you to do something for me, discreetly." "Eleanor, what's wrong? You sound unlike yourself," David responded, his concern evident. "I just dropped Chloe off for her flight to Orlando, Flight 714, and I just witnessed one of the most appalling displays of unprofessionalism and prejudice I have ever encountered from a Global Wings employee." Eleanor recounted the incident, her voice gaining strength with each detail, the anger bubbling just beneath the surface. She described Bethany's demeanor, her specific words, and Chloe's reaction. David listened in silence, a rare occurrence for the usually voluble HR executive. When Eleanor finished, he let out a low whistle. "Good heavens, Eleanor. That's unacceptable. Who was the flight attendant?" "Her name is Bethany Rourke. I got it from the name tag on her uniform. Blonde hair, sharp features, about 40s. She was working gate B23. Eleanor's voice was now perfectly composed, clinical even. "David, I want her removed from duty, immediately, pending a full investigation. And I want you to personally oversee that investigation. I want every single complaint, every single incident report, every single piece of feedback concerning Ms. Rourke dug up and scrutinized. I want to know if this is an isolated incident or a pattern of behavior. Consider it done, Eleanor. I'll get on it right away. But if I may ask, why the discretion?" David probed gently. He knew Eleanor well enough to understand there was always a strategic reason behind her requests. "Because I haven't officially announced my role as CEO to the wider company yet," Eleanor explained. "The public announcement is still a few days away. I want to handle this internally without a spectacle. I don't want it to look like a personal vendetta, even though, frankly, it feels very much like one. I want due process, but I want it thorough, swift, and merciless if her actions warrant it. We have a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, David. This reflects poorly on the entire airline, and it's certainly not the culture I intend to foster." "Understood, Eleanor. I'll manage it with the utmost discretion and urgency. I'll brief the flight operations team and ensure she's pulled from her next scheduled flight. No questions asked, and I'll have a preliminary report for you by end of day tomorrow." "Thank you, David. And one more thing," Eleanor added, a hint of something unyielding in her tone. "I want to ensure Chloe has a pleasant flight, discreetly check on her, perhaps a special snack, a kind word from another attendant. Nothing that would single her out, but just to let her know someone cares." "Will do, Eleanor. Leave it all with me." Eleanor hung up, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over her. She knew David would handle it meticulously. He was not only exceptionally competent, but also deeply aligned with her values regarding diversity and respect in the workplace. As she made her way through the bustling terminal towards her own departing flight, a private jet she used for official business travel, Eleanor felt a renewed sense of purpose. This incident, while painful, had crystallized her mission. Global Wings under her leadership would be an airline where everyone, from the highest-ranking executive to the youngest passenger, felt respected and valued. Bethany Rourke had just become the unfortunate, unwitting catalyst for change. Meanwhile, Bethany, back at gate B23, was blissfully unaware of the seismic shift she had just orchestrated. She continued processing boarding passes, her irritation at the uppity woman and her braided kid, lingering but quickly fading into the background of her daily grievances. She looked forward to her upcoming flight to Paris, a prestigious international route, where she could once again bask in the perceived glamour of her job, far from the mundane domestic departures of O'Hare. She had a difficult life, a challenging divorce, and bills piling up. She often rationalized her less-than-stellar attitude as a coping mechanism, a way to maintain control in a world that felt increasingly out of it. She saw herself as a gatekeeper, not just of boarding passes, but of standards, and in her mind, Eleanor and Chloe had failed to meet them. The irony, as she would soon discover, would be exquisitely brutal. The next morning, the corporate offices of Global Wings buzzed with a different kind of energy. The official press release announcing Eleanor Vance as the new CEO had just hit the wires, sending ripples of excitement and, for some, apprehension throughout the company. Her reputation as a sharp, decisive, and highly ethical leader from her previous role at a major tech conglomerate preceded her. Eleanor was in her spacious, newly redecorated office, preparing for a series of high-level meetings when David Chen, head of HR, entered, his face grim. He carried a thick folder. "Good morning, Eleanor," David said, his usual cheerful demeanor absent. "I have that preliminary report on Bethany Rourke." Eleanor gestured towards the chair opposite her desk. "Please, David, what have you found?" David opened the folder, revealing a stack of documents. "Well, to put it mildly, this isn't an isolated incident. Bethany Rourke has a history, a long one." Eleanor's jaw tightened. "Give me the details." "Over the past 5 years," David began, "we have no fewer than 12 formal complaints against Ms. Rourke from passengers, ranging from rude and condescending remarks, refusal of service, which was later overturned, thankfully, to outright dismissiveness towards minority passengers and families with young children. There are also 3 internal reports from fellow crew members citing her difficult behavior, lack of team cooperation, and, in one instance, a veiled accusation of racial insensitivity during a layover in Atlanta. Most of these complaints were handled with a verbal warning or a mandatory customer service refresher course." Eleanor listened, her expression unreadable. "And why were these not escalated further?" David sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Frankly, Eleanor, the previous administration had a more laissez-faire approach to employee conduct. As long as there wasn't a major lawsuit or a PR disaster, things tended to get swept under the rug. Bethany's seniority, coupled with her consistent, albeit minimum, performance in terms of flight safety, meant she largely flew under the radar. No one wanted the headache of dealing with a long-term employee, especially not one who knows the rulebook inside and out and is notoriously litigious in her personal life. So she's been allowed to continue this behavior unchecked, affecting our passengers and our brand, because it was easier?" Eleanor's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. "Essentially, yes," David admitted, looking genuinely frustrated. "It's a systemic issue we need to address." "Indeed, and we will. Starting with Miss Rourke. What about her employment contract? Is there anything that could prevent immediate termination, assuming the investigation confirms this pattern of misconduct?" David consulted a document in the folder. "Her contract has standard clauses for gross misconduct, breach of company policy regarding discrimination, and conduct detrimental to the company's reputation. Given the documented history, and especially yesterday's incident, which you personally witnessed and can corroborate, I believe we have ample grounds for immediate termination. We'll offer her a chance to explain herself, of course, as per due process, but the evidence is compelling." "Good," Eleanor stated. "I want to schedule a disciplinary hearing for Ms. Rourke first thing tomorrow morning. I want you, the head of flight operations, and our chief legal counsel present. And I will also be there." David raised an eyebrow. "You want to be present, Eleanor? As CEO, that's unusual for a disciplinary hearing of this nature." "It is," Eleanor conceded, her gaze firm. "But this isn't just about one employee. This is about setting a new standard for Global Wings. It's about demonstrating that we value our passengers and that we will not tolerate any form of discrimination or mistreatment. This is a message that needs to be delivered from the very top. Also, I want to look her in the eye." "Understood," David said, a hint of admiration in his voice. "I'll arrange everything. In the meantime, I've already pulled her from her next scheduled international flight, as per your request yesterday." She was quite indignant about it when she called scheduling. Eleanor offered a faint, humorless smile. "I imagine she was. Let her be indignant. She'll have plenty more to be indignant about very soon." Later that day, Eleanor received a text message from Chloe. "Landed safely, Mom. Flight was good. The flight attendant who brought me my special juice was super nice. I love you." A wave of relief washed over Eleanor, quickly followed by a resurgence of determination. Chloe's experience, initially marred by an act of prejudice, had been salvaged by the kindness of another. That was the global wings Eleanor envisioned. Meanwhile, Bethany Rourke was having a terrible day. First, the unexpected call from scheduling, informing her she'd been temporarily removed from her coveted Paris route due to an administrative review. She'd argued, threatened, and demanded an explanation, but the dispatcher had remained tight-lipped, simply stating it was a directive from HR. Now she had an official email in her inbox requiring her presence at a disciplinary hearing the following morning. The email mentioned a recent passenger complaint. Bethany scoffed. A passenger complaint? She got those occasionally. Usually they were quickly dismissed, or she'd get a slap on the wrist. This felt different, though. The cancellation of her Paris flight was a significant blow, both financially and to her ego. She spent the evening racking her brain, trying to recall any particularly difficult passengers. The image of the uppity woman and her bratty daughter at the boarding gate flashed through her mind. No, it couldn't be that. They were just ordinary people. Besides, she hadn't said anything that bad, had she? Just some constructive criticism, as she saw it. Bethany went to bed that night feeling a mixture of indignation and mild apprehension, completely oblivious to the fact that the ordinary woman she had mocked was now holding the reins of her entire career, and that the administrative review was actually a meticulously constructed case for her immediate dismissal. The storm was gathering, and Bethany Rourke, for the first time in her insulated professional life, was about to be caught right in its eye. The conference room felt colder than usual the next morning. The polished mahogany table reflected the sterile overhead lights, casting a stark glow on the faces gathered around it. David Chen, his expression serious, sat at one end, flanked by Sarah Jenkins, the sharp-witted chief legal counsel, and Mark Thompson, the stoic head of flight operations. At the head of the table, commanding the room with her mere presence, sat Eleanor Vance. Bethany Rourke walked in, her usual confident stride slightly faltering as she took in the unusual lineup. She had expected a low-level HR manager, perhaps a flight supervisor, but the CEO and the head of legal? A knot tightened in her stomach. She tried to project an air of indignant defiance, her blonde bob perfectly coiffed, her uniform meticulously pressed. "Good morning, Ms. Rourke," David began, his voice calm and formal. "Thank you for attending this disciplinary hearing." Bethany nodded curtly, taking the seat indicated for her. She avoided Eleanor's gaze, sensing an unfamiliar intensity there. "Before we proceed," Eleanor's voice cut through the air, clear and resonant, "I want to introduce myself. For those of you who may not be aware, I am Eleanor Vance, the new CEO of Global Wings. My official public announcement was made yesterday." A visible tremor went through Bethany. Her eyes widened, finally snapping to Eleanor, the polite, soft-spoken woman from the boarding gate, the mother of the braided kid. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. The blood drained from her face, leaving her suddenly ashen. Her carefully constructed composure began to crumble. Eleanor allowed a moment for the shock to sink in, then continued, her voice devoid of emotion, purely business. "We are here today to discuss a formal complaint lodged against you, Ms. Rourke, regarding an incident that occurred at Gate B23 yesterday morning concerning Flight 714 to Orlando." David then took over, methodically outlining the complaint. "The passenger, Miss Eleanor Vance, present here today, alleges that you engaged in unprofessional, demeaning, and potentially discriminatory behavior towards her and her 11-year-old daughter, Chloe Vance, an unaccompanied minor, during the boarding process. Bethany stammered, I don't know what you're talking about. I was just doing my job. There was a girl with a lot of beads in her hair. I was just giving her some safety instructions, making sure she understood the rules. She tried to regain some semblance of her earlier defiance, but her voice was shaky. Sarah Jenkins, the legal counsel, interjected. Ms. Rourke, Ms. Vance's complaint details specific remarks you made, such as implying her daughter didn't know her place, commenting disparagingly on her appearance, and questioning Ms. Vance's parenting, stating some parents just don't teach their children manners anymore, and suggesting she was trying to buy her way onto a plane for special treatment. Do you recall making these statements? Bethany squirmed. I might have said something about knowing her place in a general sense, for safety. And the beads, they could be a choking hazard for a younger child. I was just concerned for her well-being. And I was trying to manage the line. People pushy these days. Her words trailed off, weak and unconvincing, even to her own ears. Eleanor finally spoke, her gaze piercing. Ms. Rourke, I was standing right there. Your tone was aggressive, your words were dismissive, and your intent was clearly to humiliate my daughter and myself. You took a young girl's excitement for her first flight and deliberately crushed it with your prejudice. Do you deny that? Bethany recoiled as if struck. The full weight of her actions, coupled with the terrifying realization of Eleanor's identity, was crashing down on her. I didn't realize, she mumbled, her face now visibly pale. David then opened the thick folder. And this isn't an isolated incident, Ms. Rourke. Over the past 5 years, we have documented 12 separate passenger complaints detailing similar instances of rudeness, condescension, and perceived discriminatory behavior towards various passengers, particularly those from minority backgrounds or with young children. We also have 3 internal reports from fellow crew members expressing concerns about your conduct. He pushed a stack of papers across the table towards her. Would you like to review these? Bethany stared at the pile of documents, her jaw slack. The smug self-assurance she usually projected had completely vanished, replaced by genuine fear. But those were just minor things, misunderstandings. No one ever took them seriously. We do now, Eleanor stated, her voice devoid of any warmth. Global Wings has a strict zero-tolerance policy against discrimination and mistreatment of our passengers. Your behavior yesterday, and the documented pattern of similar incidents, represents a clear breach of your employment contract and a significant detriment to the company's reputation and values. We pride ourselves on inclusivity and respect, and your actions are fundamentally antithetical to that. Mark Thompson, head of flight operations, spoke for the first time, his voice a low rumble. Ms. Rourke, your role as a flight attendant is not just about safety, it's about providing a welcoming and respectful environment for our passengers. Your conduct has repeatedly failed in that regard. It reflects poorly on every single one of your colleagues who uphold these standards every day. Sarah Jenkins then delivered the final blow. Given the severity and pattern of your misconduct, and after careful review of all available evidence, Global Wings has made the decision to terminate your employment, effective immediately, for gross misconduct. Bethany gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief and horror. Terminate? You can't. I've been with the airline for 15 years. I have seniority. This is unfair. You can't just fire me over one little incident. This is a personal vendetta, she shrieked, finally breaking down, tears streaming down her face. Eleanor leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. This is not a little incident, Ms. Rourke. This is a pattern of unacceptable behavior that we, as a company, can no longer tolerate. And it is not a personal vendetta. It is a necessary and justified consequence of your actions. Your seniority, as you call it, does not grant you immunity from our core values. Furthermore, you will receive no severance package as the grounds for termination are gross misconduct. You will be escorted off the premises by security, and your company ID and all access will be revoked immediately. Your final paycheck will be mailed to your address on file. The reality of her situation crushed Bethany. No job, no severance, Her international travel perks, her status, her entire professional identity, all gone, just like that. She looked at Eleanor, tears and snot running down her face, a desperate plea in her eyes. "Please, Miss Vance, please. I need this job. I have bills. My divorce." Eleanor held up a hand, stopping her. "Ms. Rourke, your personal circumstances, while perhaps challenging, do not excuse your professional misconduct. My daughter Chloe did not deserve the humiliation you inflicted upon her. No passenger deserves to be treated with such disdain and prejudice. You had ample opportunities to correct your behavior, as evidenced by the previous warnings and retraining. You chose not to. The consequences of those choices are now upon you." David then spoke, his voice firm but not unkind. "Ms. Rourke, we have security waiting outside to escort you. You'll be allowed to collect your personal belongings from your locker under their supervision. There will be no further discussion." Bethany stood up, trembling, her face a mask of utter devastation. The proud, disdainful flight attendant from the boarding gate was gone, replaced by a broken woman. She cast one last desperate glance at Eleanor, who met her gaze with a resolute, unwavering stillness. There was no triumph in Eleanor's eyes, only a quiet, firm conviction that justice, however painful, had been served. As Bethany was led out of the room by security, the silence that descended was heavy, but it was also a silence of profound change. The old ways of Global Wings were over. A new era, built on respect and accountability, had just begun. News of Bethany Rourke's termination spread through Global Wings like wildfire. While the official internal memo simply cited gross misconduct, whispers and rumors soon filled the break rooms and galleys. Many long-term employees, who had witnessed Bethany's difficult behavior for years but felt powerless to do anything, expressed a quiet sense of relief. Some who had been on the receiving end of her sharp tongue felt a vindicated satisfaction. A few, particularly those who benefited from the old guard leniency, grumbled about the new CEO being too harsh or playing favorites. However, Eleanor Vance didn't just stop at one termination. David Chen, under her direction, initiated a full company-wide review of HR policies, employee conduct protocols, and customer service training. He also implemented a more robust system for handling passenger and employee complaints, ensuring that no concern would be swept under the rug again. Eleanor also made a point of addressing the company's culture directly. In her first all-hands meeting as CEO, a live-streamed event to all Global Wings employees worldwide, she spoke eloquently about her vision for the airline. She emphasized a commitment to diversity, inclusion, and a culture of care for passengers and employees alike. She didn't specifically mention Bethany Rourke, but her words, delivered with quiet passion and unwavering resolve, resonated deeply. "Every single person who steps onto a Global Wings aircraft," Eleanor declared, her voice strong and clear, "whether they are traveling for business, pleasure, or for the very first time, deserves to feel safe, respected, and welcomed. And every single employee, from our baggage handlers to our pilots, deserves to work in an environment where they are valued, supported, and held to the highest standards of professionalism and empathy. There will be no room for prejudice, no tolerance for disrespect, and no exceptions to our commitment to kindness. We are a global family, and we will treat each other and our customers as such." The impact was immediate and palpable. Flight attendants, gate agents, and customer service representatives felt a renewed sense of pride and accountability. Those who had been marginalized or overlooked under the previous regime felt seen and heard. The shift in leadership brought a fresh wave of positive morale, but also a healthy dose of fear for those who had previously relied on cutting corners or displaying poor conduct. For Chloe, the memory of the incident at the gate slowly faded, replaced by the warmth of her grandmother's hugs and the excitement of Disney World. Eleanor made sure to reinforce the message that the flight attendant's behavior was a reflection of her own unhappiness, not Chloe's worth. She also took Chloe on a special Take Your Daughter to Work day a few weeks later, showing her the bustling operations center, the pilots in the simulator, and introducing her to many kind and professional Global Wings employees. It was Eleanor's way of demonstrating that the bad apple didn't spoil the whole bushel, and that true power lay in dignity and respect. Meanwhile, Bethany's life quickly spiraled. Losing her job meant losing her primary source of income, her health insurance, and her cherished travel benefits. Her divorce proceedings, already contentious, became even more acrimonious as her ex-husband used her unemployment as leverage. Her carefully maintained financial stability crumbled under the weight of mounting bills and legal fees. She tried to find employment with other airlines, but word of her termination from Global Wings, especially with the high-profile nature of Eleanor Vance's appointment, preceded her. The aviation industry, while vast, is also surprisingly interconnected. No major airline wanted to take a chance on an employee terminated for gross misconduct related to passenger discrimination, especially not with a new CEO making such a public stance on company culture. Her applications were met with polite but firm rejections. Even smaller regional carriers turned her down. Desperate, Bethany took a job as a cashier at a discount department store, a stark contrast to her previous career, flying to glamorous international destinations. The uniform was drab, the pay was minimum wage, and the customers, often frustrated and demanding, bore no resemblance to the sophisticated travelers she once served, or more accurately, judged. The irony was not lost on her. She who once sneered at people not knowing their place now found herself struggling to make ends meet, working a job she once would have deemed beneath her. Her once perfectly coiffed blonde bob became less immaculate, her clothes less polished. The snarky remarks that had once been directed at passengers now occasionally slipped out towards customers or colleagues, earning her disciplinary warnings from a no-nonsense store manager. She began to see the world, and her own actions, through a new, harsher lens. The casual cruelty she had inflicted on others now felt like a heavy burden. She remembered Chloe's wide, innocent eyes, Eleanor's quiet, powerful resolve, and a sickening wave of regret would wash over her. One day, while restocking shelves, Bethany saw a Global Wings commercial on a television display in the electronics section. The commercial featured diverse, smiling passengers and a diverse, smiling crew, all exuding warmth and professionalism. The tagline flashed across the screen: Global Wings, flying with respect, soaring with care. A brief glimpse of Eleanor Vance, looking poised and confident, appeared as she offered a warm greeting. Bethany felt a bitter pang in her chest, a potent cocktail of regret, shame, and the cold, hard realization of what she had lost and why. The karma, it seemed, had hit hard and fast, leaving her grounded indefinitely, while the airline she once worked for, under Eleanor Vance's leadership, was soaring to new heights. Months turned into a year. Global Wings, under Eleanor Vance's transformative leadership, was indeed soaring. Customer satisfaction scores had risen dramatically, employee morale was at an all-time high, and the company was consistently lauded in the industry for its progressive policies and inclusive culture. Eleanor had proven herself not just a shrewd businesswoman, but a visionary leader who understood the profound impact of empathy and respect. Chloe, now 12, was thriving. She flew frequently to visit her grandmother, always with a bright smile, her excitement for travel fully restored. She even had a new set of colorful beads in her braids, a silent testament to her mother's earlier words of empowerment. Bethany Rourke, on the other hand, was still working at the discount department store. Her life had not improved. If anything, the drudgery of her job and the constant financial strain had worn her down further. The initial shock of her termination had given way to a deep, gnawing regret, a constant replay of her past mistakes, particularly the incident at the airport. She had plenty of time to reflect, to realize the profound error of her ways. She understood now, with painful clarity, the difference between confidence and arrogance, between setting boundaries and inflicting cruelty. It was a Tuesday afternoon, typically a slow day at the department store. Bethany was at the checkout, mechanically scanning items, her mind miles away. Suddenly, a familiar voice, a voice that still sent a shiver down her spine, spoke. "Good afternoon. Just these 2 items, please." Bethany looked up, and her blood ran cold. Standing across from her, a small, elegant shopping bag in her hand, was Eleanor Vance. And beside her, holding a brightly colored children's book, was Chloe, now a little taller, but still recognizable with her vibrant braids. Eleanor, looking effortlessly chic in casual attire, didn't immediately recognize Bethany. To her, Bethany was just another cashier. But for Bethany, the sight of them, together, happy, successful, was a punch to the gut. All the shame, the regret, the bitterness of the past year flooded her. "Of course," Bethany managed to croak out, her voice barely a whisper, completely unlike her usual sharp tone. Her hands trembled slightly as she took Eleanor's items. A small gift for someone and a bottle of expensive hand lotion. Eleanor, distracted by a text on her phone, glanced up briefly and then did a double take. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, narrowed slightly. The blonde bob, the angular features, the familiar glint of a name tag. Bethany. Recognition dawned, slow and unsettling. The polite, pleasant expression on Eleanor's face hardened almost imperceptibly. Chloe, however, noticed nothing amiss. She was engrossed in her book. The silence in the transaction was heavy, charged with unspoken history. Bethany, mortified, avoided eye contact, focusing intently on scanning the items, her heart pounding. She wished the floor would swallow her whole. "That will be $37.50, Bethany mumbled, her voice barely audible. Eleanor handed over her credit card, her gaze still fixed on Bethany, a complex mixture of emotions swirling in her eyes. Surprise, a hint of disdain, and a fleeting flicker of something that looked almost like pity. As Bethany processed the card, she finally gathered a sliver of courage, or perhaps it was desperation. "Ms. Vance," she began, her voice cracking, I just wanted to say—" She paused, struggling to find the words. The tears welled up in her eyes, hot and unexpected. "I am so incredibly sorry for what I said, for how I treated you and your daughter that day at the airport. It was wrong. I was wrong." Eleanor watched her, her expression unreadable. She took her credit card back, then the receipt. Chloe finally looked up from her book, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, and glanced curiously at the crying cashier. "Mom, is everything okay?" Chloe asked, a slight frown on her face. Eleanor placed a reassuring hand on Chloe's shoulder. "Everything's fine, sweetie." Then she turned back to Bethany. Her voice was calm, almost detached. "Ms. Rourke, your apology is noted." There was no warmth, no forgiveness in her tone, just a cool acknowledgement. Bethany had expected nothing less, yet the starkness of it still stung. I understand if you can't forgive me," Bethany continued, tears now freely streaming. "I truly do. I deserve what happened. Losing my job, everything. It's been so hard, and I've had a lot of time to think about how awful I was, about how I treated people. And I'm really, truly sorry, especially to Chloe." Eleanor looked at Bethany, then at Chloe, who was now staring wide-eyed at the crying woman. Eleanor considered her words carefully. She wasn't one to hold grudges, but she also wasn't one to easily forgive acts of prejudice, especially when they targeted her child. The pain she had seen in Chloe's eyes that day was not something she could simply erase. "Ms. Rourke," Eleanor said, her voice still measured, "what you experienced was a consequence of your actions. It was not a punishment I sought to inflict for personal gratification, but a necessary step to uphold the values of the company I now lead. Discrimination and disrespect have no place at Global Wings, or anywhere else for that matter. I hope you have truly learned from this experience." Eleanor paused, her gaze softening almost imperceptibly, a flicker of the empathy that made her such a powerful leader. "For Chloe's sake, and for yours, I hope you use this experience to become a better person. That's all I can say." She picked up her bag and gently guided Chloe away from the checkout. Chloe, still looking back at the crying cashier with a puzzled expression, walked hand in hand with her mother. Bethany watched them go, her tears still falling, but now mixed with a strange sense of catharsis. Eleanor Vance had offered no easy absolution, no false comfort, but in her words, Bethany recognized a glimmer of truth, a challenge to truly change. The encounter, though humiliating, was also a painful, necessary mirror held up to her past. It was a final, hard lesson, delivered not with triumph, but with quiet dignity. As she stood there, alone at the checkout, Bethany knew that the path to redemption, if it existed for her, would be long and arduous. But for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of resolve to try. The karma had indeed come full circle, not just as a punishment, but as a harsh, undeniable call for transformation. Months turned into a year. Bethany Rourke continued to work at the department store. The encounter with Eleanor and Chloe had been a turning point for her. The public, humiliating acknowledgement of her past actions, coupled with Eleanor's firm, yet not entirely unforgiving response, had deeply impacted her. She stopped making sarcastic remarks, even when customers were difficult. She began to genuinely try to be helpful, to offer a smile, to listen more. It was a slow, arduous process of unlearning years of ingrained negativity and self-pity, but she was trying. She started volunteering at a local animal shelter on her days off, finding solace in the unconditional love of the animals and the simple act of caring for another living being. This small act of kindness, born out of a desperate need for connection and purpose, began to chip away at the hardened shell she had built around herself. She wasn't seeking forgiveness from Eleanor Vance, but rather she was seeking a way to forgive herself, to become a person she could respect. Meanwhile, Global Wings continued its ascent under Eleanor's leadership. Her Culture of Care initiative blossomed, extending beyond customer service to internal employee programs, diversity training, and mentorship opportunities. The airline became a benchmark for corporate responsibility and an employer of choice. Eleanor frequently used her platform to speak about the importance of empathy, respect, and diversity in all aspects of life and business. One evening, Eleanor was reviewing reports in her office. A new initiative, Wings of Opportunity, a scholarship program for underprivileged youth interested in aviation careers, was showing promising results. A small frame photograph on her desk caught her eye. A picture of Chloe, beaming, holding a model airplane. It reminded her of the boarding gate incident, of the pain in Chloe's eyes, and of the quiet, powerful resolution she had made that day. She never forgot Bethany Rourke. The encounter at the department store had been a stark reminder of the long-term impact of unkindness in the slow, difficult path of personal change. Eleanor didn't feel triumphant or gloating. Instead, she felt a profound sense of responsibility. Her actions, born out of protecting her child, had not just led to one person's comeuppance, but had catalyzed a positive transformation within an entire corporation. David Chen often joked with her, "You know, Eleanor, that flight attendant was probably the best thing that ever happened to Global Wings. She gave you the perfect, undeniable reason to completely overhaul the company culture." Eleanor would smile, a thoughtful, reflective smile. "Perhaps," she'd say, "but it came at a cost for Chloe, and certainly a heavy cost for Ms. Rourke. My hope is that the positive changes we've made and continue to make will far outweigh that initial pain." The story of the flight attendant Mock's black girl in boarding line, her mom turns out to be the airline CEO, wasn't just a tale of justified karma. It was a powerful testament to the ripple effect of individual actions. It showed how a moment of prejudice could ignite a profound shift in power dynamics, leading to a widespread cultural change. It proved that true leadership isn't just about profits and market shares, but about instilling values, demanding respect, and building a workplace, and indeed a world, where everyone feels they belong, and everyone, regardless of their background or appearance, is treated with dignity. Bethany Rourke's fall was a harsh lesson, but Eleanor Vance's rise ensured that many, many others would soar. And there you have it, a story that truly makes you believe in the power of karma and the strength of a mother's love. From a casual act of disrespect at a boarding gate to a complete corporate overhaul, this tale of Eleanor Vance and Bethany Rourke shows us that how we treat others truly matters. It's a powerful reminder that judging someone based on their appearance or perceived status can have monumental, unforeseen consequences. What began as a moment of prejudice ultimately led to profound change, demonstrating that true leadership is about more than just power. It's about respect, empathy, and accountability. If this story resonated with you, if it made you cheer for Eleanor, or even feel a flicker of understanding for Bethany's eventual reckoning, then please hit that like button. Share this video with anyone who needs a reminder that dignity and kindness always prevail. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas and inspiring stories. What's your take on karma? Let us know in the comments below.